Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Maple Leafs Lounge. I am your host, Peter Baracchini. As always, I'm joined by my colleague over at the Hockey Writers, Alex Hobson. And you may know that we have a new face with us today, a fellow Maple Leaf writer, again, at the Hockey Writers, Shane Seney. Shane, glad to have you on the Maple Leafs Lounge to talk everything about the team that, we sort of love and hate at the same time, and to join in on the misery or good times, hopefully in the near future. Shane, how are you doing, man?
Doing great, guys. Yeah, thanks for having me. Long-time caller, long-time listener, first-time caller, first-time jitters. Who knows? But no, I'm happy to be here, guys, and looking forward to this episode.
The trajectory from listener to caller to host. It's an impressive one.
There we go.
Definitely. And we couldn't be happier to have Shane on. And what a great episode for his first time on the show. But before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by morningskate.io, the daily newsletter delivered to your inbox Monday to Friday, jam-packed with the best hockey stuff on the planet. With your daily dose of news, rumors, funnies, histories, you name it, you will get it all. You will see a description in the link below. All you got to do is add your email and you are set to go. So as you know, we've been on hiatus for a few weeks because talk in Maple Leaf land has been pretty slow, but now things are starting to pick up. And with the World Junior Championship finally to an end, it was an entertaining tournament, and the Maple Leafs had 3 prospects taking part in the tournament, 2 on Finland, who came ever so close, to literally inches to winning World Junior Gold, as well as one player or one prospect on Team USA. Roni, Hirvonen, and Topi Niemela won a silver medal for Team Finland. Roni Hirvonen was about a point per game, 7 points in 7 games for Finland, and Topi Niemela had 6 assists in 7 games for on the back end, including a nice setup to tie the game up in the gold medal game. And Matthew Knies finished with 3 assists in 5 games for Team USA. Alex, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, the Maple Leafs do have a deep prospect system. Others may disagree, but with the way that our prospects played at this tournament right now, especially for Hirvonen and Niemela, what were your initial thoughts on their overall tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely saw improvement from Roni Hirvonen, if nothing else. I think his tournament in 2020 or 2021, he had, I believe it was 6 points in 7 games, and he looked all right throughout the tournament, but and he scored a couple of pretty big goals for them as well, but you could see that there was another gear for him to take. And obviously being Team Finland's captain this year, I think he took another gear. And I think that he sort of showed people who were watching and Leaf fans alike that there's more to him than just what he is and what he's shown so far. He's 5'9", but he plays a lot bigger than that. He plays much bigger than his size. He's obviously a leader at this age because he was Team Finland's captain. So to have that kind of responsibility at his age, and him not being the oldest player on the team either, I think it says a lot about his leadership qualities. And Niemela, while he didn't have the defenseman of the tournament quite type of performance this year that he did last year, I still think that he had a great tournament. 6 assists through 7 games, obviously played a big part on that goal to tie it up for Team Finland in the gold medal game. And I think that even though he didn't score a goal, you can really see the damage that he does from the back end. I know that you were tweeting about it, Peter. He's got a really deceptive shot from the point that's really good at getting through traffic and creating rebounds. And obviously you saw his assist as well. And I think it just sort of furthers the notion that the Leafs may have come away with a steal, because if you remember, they got both Hirvonen and Niemela in that trade with the Ottawa Senators, who they ended up getting Tyler Kleven, who's he's a prospect himself. But both Hirvonen and Niemela they had a great tournament, and for a guy like Niemela, especially, who he was drafted for his hockey IQ and his defensive ability for his age, for him to have this offensive explosion at this stage of his career, in such an early stage, I think that I think he's got a lot to show Leaf fans and hockey fans alike, like I said. And I think this tournament was a great stepping point for both of them. I would love to see both of these players on the Marlies at some point. I think they're both headed back to Finland this year, but with the performance like that, and assuming they don't take a step back in their development this year, I think that there's a real chance we could see them play for the Marlies next year, maybe even late in the season. So I was very impressed by them.
Yeah, I came away very impressed with Hirvonen, especially his ability for a smaller player to use that size. And we talk about bigger players using their size to their advantage. He's using that 5'9" frame to still get that inside edge and still be deceiving when attacking on the forecheck with his speed and his tenacity. And I really thought that was really standing out for him throughout the whole entire tournament. And also, if we're combining points overall, from the last two tournaments, Hirvonen, I believe, had 14 points in 16 games at the World Juniors. So not a bad showing and not a bad resume for two tournaments. And obviously with the canceled tournament, he wanted to make a statement, and I'm pretty sure he did overall for Finland. And Shane, jumping over to you. Obviously, Maple Leaf fans, all the attention is going to be on Matthew Knies with his size, his power forward mentality, and his shooting. Obviously, production wasn't great. Obviously, Maple Leafs fans are going to come away very disappointed. And obviously, I want to say the trolling and the hating is already out in full force about how, to take a small sample size out of that and already, pile up on a 19-year-old prospect. Is this really a big cause for concern, or is this just blown out of proportion typically by Leafs Nation? And if not, what did you see in Knies' game that Maple Leafs fans should really pay attention to?
Yeah, they should be paying attention to his power, his size, his work ethic. He didn't mail it in, even though the puck wasn't going in for him. He's got that NHL ready shot. We all know that. And he didn't really do too much as far as, finding the back of the net goes, but the Americans struggled, and there was a disappointing tournament for them. But as we all know, Leafs Nation tends to either go to one end or the other of the spectrum. So right now they're on the far side, and he's heading back to college. He's in line for a huge sophomore year. It's going to be, for me too, what stands out is his connection to Arizona. And it always seems like it just goes back to Austin Matthews. And some people are just expecting him to turn into something like that, where it's just like, that's too much pressure for somebody that's not the same player. So I think if people keep the expectations down a little bit, they're going to be pleasantly surprised to see that he's going to go back to school. He's going to get stronger, faster, harder to play against. And we all know he can score goals. So that's not going to be an issue. I can see him, eventually jumping into a top 6 role, but that's going to be a couple years away, and Leafs Nation needs to be patient for that.
Yeah, and the big takeaway is obviously we're seeing an underrated aspect to his playmaking, and obviously we've seen the shots throughout his freshman season with the University of Minnesota. But even looking at Kevin McGran's analysis from Haley Wickenheiser herself, who said that she liked what she saw from Matthew Knies. She said, quote, "I thought he played physical and his line was quite good. A snapshot of a few games. That's not really much to say. It highlights what he's very good at, which is his shot, physical presence, and his ability to make plays. Something that, we focus too much on the goals, but the playmaking is just as important as we say in minor hockey, assists are just as important as goals. And just like in this tournament, despite USA not going all the way, making a deep run, I still thought Matthew Knies was very impressive despite the early exit."
Exactly. Don't read too much into it. It's, great for his development just to be there playing against a top talent in his age group. So there's no cause for concern. The organization, like you said, is happy. So, we'll head off to next season and see where that takes us.
Yeah, I think the other thing to point out too is on one end, you've got, don't let a bad tournament define Matthew Knies. But I think it is also important to remember that good performances of the World Juniors also don't mean that much in the long run. I mean, you look back to the 2016 tournament, 2 players off at the top of my head that outscored Mitch Marner at that tournament, Alex Nylander and Dennis Malgin. So if that doesn't tell you all you need to know about the World Juniors, I'm not saying don't look at Hirvonen and Niemela's performances as a positive stepping stone, but at the same time, it also doesn't mean they're going to be superstars. Just like Matthew Knies' 3 assists in 5 games doesn't mean he's a bust.
Right, and Hirvonen, he reminded me of Leo Komarov, and the Leafs were great when they had him as a pest in the bottom 6, and we have Knies where it's like the top of the prospect spectrum, and then Hirvonen where it comes in at the bottom. So he's going to fill that bottom six role in the next couple of years, and he's going to have to play like that to do so. So it's great to see he has that style of game in it. And yeah, all his goals were on the power play, but still, he's probably not going to get power play minutes in the show. So he's going to have to work for his minutes, and it looks like he has the capabilities to do so.
Yeah.
To sort of summarize everything, everybody played great. Let's just keep it at that. Positive steps going forward. And even more positive news, jumping into our next topic. This has been out for, some time, but as you may know, top prospect Rodion Amirov, drafted 15th overall in 2020. Obviously, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor early on in January or February, and he had to undergo treatment. As a result, his season came to an end, and that explains why he's been dealing with such a really down season in 2021-22. But there's some good news on the horizon. There's the possibility, according to a report by David Alter, it was written by David Alter, but it was also reported in an interview from Russia newspaper Sport Express that Amirov is eyeing a possible return in November. And obviously, undergoing treatment for a brain tumor, obviously, he's got to get his strength back. And the most important thing is he's doing well. He's in good spirits. He's healthy, and he's on the mend, and he's eyeing that return. I want to get both of your takes on this. Shane, obviously, he's got to take it in stride. He doesn't want to he shouldn't overdo everything, but the fact that he's making this return should it be a good sign for the Maple Leafs, and not only that, but also Amirov.
Yeah, of course. First and foremost, his health is the most important thing. It doesn't mean anything about, looking towards his NHL career and what he can and can't be. It's just most importantly getting healthy, getting stronger, and being able to get back on his skates on a regular basis and improve his game. One thing that stands out for me is the Maple Leafs and how they're handling it. They are covering a lot of the medical costs or all of the medical costs. They're, helping him and his family out off the ice. So, a lot of stuff gets said about the Leafs and said about the organization, but it's first class from top to bottom, and seeing how they're handling this it's really cool to see. So I'm rooting for the kid. It was a great trade that Dubas made to bring him, get the pick and select him. So I really hope it works out for everybody.
Alex, obviously, I want to get your thoughts on Amirov and his possible return in November. Obviously, you don't want to rush something like this, but is this obviously still a good sign for him as well? And what do you make of the situation and the fact that he's able to come back?
Well, just to echo what Shane said, I mean, obviously, this is one of those situations where you read about it and the realization hits you like a brick, and the reminder that these hockey players, we sit down and we watch them and we pay money to go see them, but they're humans in the end, just like the rest of us. And, just like Shane said, life comes first in a situation like this. And, too many of these situations in the past, not just with professional athletes, but just with people in general, they end up for the worst. And so to hear that Amirov, only a couple months after he was diagnosed with the brain tumor, could be cleared to play in November. I mean, Ivan Miroshnichenko, who the Capitals just drafted, obviously had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he was just cleared to play as well. So it's great to see Rodion Amirov looking like he's got a path back to playing hockey full-time professionally. And it feels wrong to talk about Amirov as a hockey player when he's got this to deal with. So I will preface this with, he obviously, like I said, his recovery comes first, and that he shouldn't overdo anything. He shouldn't be back on the ice until he's absolutely cleared and good to go. But hopefully when that day comes, I think that a lot of people are really forgetting about how much talent this kid has. I think that, you look at the fact that the Rangers drafted Braden Schneider right after Amirov, and some people were griping about that, and understandably so. I mean, he's a top 4 defenseman for the Rangers right now. He looks like he really could have helped the Leafs, but do not sleep on Amirov, because when he was drafted, he was compared to Marian Hossa for his two-way ability. He's a good defensive player, and he's got the hands of somebody like Artemi Panarin. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's going to be capable of. Hopefully when he's in a situation other than the one that he's in Russia right now, for multiple reasons. I would like to see Kyle Dubas and the Leafs try and get him to North America, maybe get him to play some games with the Marlies so you can keep a closer eye on him. But like I said, His recovery, first and foremost, is the priority. And if he can get over that hurdle, then I think the Leafs have a really talented kid on their hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And his two-way play is absolutely phenomenal. And if you're still griping over Braden Schneider, over Rodion Amirov, and I there was something online that I know that Alex, I saw, and everybody piled in on a certain comment. Something like this, you really can't foresee. Like, to make a comment about like, oh, Kyle Dubas should have taken Braden Schneider over Rodion Amirov, who now has a brain tumor. Like, that's just absolutely ridiculous. Like, you can't predict something like this from happening. Again, I'm not going to give too much weight on that, because we all know how we all feel about it. We all know how we feel about Rodion Amirov. We know about his potential, about his upside. And now that he's healthy, obviously take it in stride. I just hope that he is able to make a great comeback and then get to his true form, because he was a very talented and promising prospect, especially in 2020. Moving on to our next topic. Again, a lot of controversy around this player because of the fact that he is the captain. He signed a massive $11 million contract over 7 seasons, or 8. I could be wrong, but 7. It is 7. Okay, there we go. I was about to say I need cap friendly again, but $11 million back in 2018. We were all ecstatic when John Tavares signed. I mean, let's be realistic. Everyone in Leafs Nation was absolutely up in arms, and we were ecstatic. Now everyone seems to be on the downturn and saying that, oh, John Tavares isn't as productive. He's not going to be the same guy that they signed him back 3-4 years ago. And now they got this heavy contract on their hands. Alex, you recently talked about a possible bounce back season for John Tavares. And I even thought that even during the season, even the year before, how he's dealt with multiple injuries. He had that oblique injury. He had that serious concussion. Is John, and this is the main point in your discussion, he's poised for a big season. Is that going to happen this season? And is John Tavares going to be healthy enough to do so?
I think there's a good chance for it. And I would hope that he's healthy enough to do so. I mean, he didn't have any major injuries at the end of the season. And obviously, unless something happened over the summer, he should be on a regular training regimen and a regular training schedule, just like he had been in years before that. I do think that people are sort of losing sight over the fact that, yeah, John Tavares is 31, 32 years old, whatever it is. Obviously on the wrong half of 30 right now, but at the same time, we're talking about John Tavares. And I feel like if he wasn't in a Leafs jersey, nobody would be having this discussion. The guy put up 76 points in 79 games last year. Sure, he was inconsistent. His goal scoring took a bit of a dip, but this is the same Leafs team that had William Nylander score 34 goals. So, in under typical circumstances where it would have been Tavares scoring 40, 45 and Nylander scoring maybe 25. The goal scoring really just balanced out this year. So I wouldn't really look at it as a massive concern that his goal scoring dipped. And also when you look at the fact that a guy like Steven Stamkos in Tampa Bay, and I know that they're different types of players, they're both goal scorers, but John Tavares scores more of the dirty goals, whereas Stamkos is more of a, set him up at the top of the circle for the one-timer type. He had a career year this year. He had over 100 points for the first time in his career, I believe. And I'm not saying that John Tavares is going to hit over 100 points, but I do think that, he's capable of putting up over 80, somewhere between 80 and 90. He had 88 points as a Leaf in his first season with the team. I think he's more than capable of doing that, maybe even hitting the 90 mark this year. I think a lot of it's going to depend on who that second line left winger ends up being. And I touched on that in the article as well, because Alex Kerfoot got the job done in that role last year, but I also think that combination of Kerfoot, Tavares, Nylander went stale at times. And I think they could use somebody a little more dynamic up there. And one other note, for anybody that says that $11 million is too much for Tavares, I think that the one thing that people got to remember too about that signing is it wasn't just for the Leafs addressing a need, and because it wasn't really a need in the end. Tavares is number one center. They already had Austin Matthews. I think it was just as much a message to the fans to say, hey, we know that we're ready to go. were ready to spend some money, because it had been a long time since the Leafs had last blown money on a free agent that wasn't named David Clarkson before that. So I think it was just as much a message to bring home a point a game, former first overall pick, Toronto boy, as it was to bring him in as a player. So I do think that he could have a big bounce back year this year. And I think he's going to be well worth the $11 million into the season.
Shane, despite missing a lot of time in 2019-20 and 2021 because of that shortened season, Tavares was still on pace for 71 and 75 points respectively. Obviously, he hit 76 this season. Obviously, the production is still pretty decent despite that heavy price tag, even though it's not going to be in that 80-90 range that fans really want to see. But you got Mitch Marner, you got Austin Matthews, and hopefully William Nylander can repeat on his star-studded season as well. Who do you think can benefit in a John Tavares bounce back season, especially if there is talks that maybe they do move on from Alexander Kerfoot, or they do find a replacement for him on the left side?
Yeah, I think, Tavares and Willie Nylander can be one of the best duos in the league. And it's not really even close. Like, to have Matthews and Marner up front, and then to have Tavares and Nylander on your second line could be, that puts the Leafs up in with the elite of the league. And I think one thing that stands out is the fact that Tavares is a master of his craft. Like, he comes in with his backpack, he does all the same routines. Mm-hmm. He's the leader in the room. That's why they signed him, to kind of set the culture of the team. And he does that better than most captains in the league. So I don't think there's any issue with John Tavares' production. And I think the people that are yelling for him to move to the wing soon don't realize how key it is to win faceoffs in your own zone, or win an offensive faceoff when it matters most. And Austin Matthews isn't absolutely amazing at winning draws. So if Tavares can kind of help where Spezza isn't there anymore to also help with the faceoffs, I think that's going to be key. But having Tavares and Nylander basically having the potential to both have career seasons together on a team's second line, I think that's a pretty good position. So there's a huge spotlight on the left wing. Kerfoot, I think he had 51 points, no power play time. Like, it was basically all even strength. So I don't love him there. I think they need a player that plays a little tougher, because like Tavares and Nylander aren't tough to play against unless the puck's in the back of the net. But they're not they're not hard on the forecheck, and they're not, getting into those dirty areas a lot. We've seen what Nylander does sometimes. So I think you have to counterbalance that, because Nylander and Tavares aren't going anywhere. And they need to find that second line left wing who can really push the pace, bring them into the fight, kick up the work ethic and the intensity. And then I think they're going to be totally fine.
Absolutely. And let's hope that maybe at some point Nick Robertson or Matthew Knies can maybe jump into that top six, just like their projected ceiling is supposed to be. But then again, that's so probably going to take some time as well. Speaking of possibilities on that left-hand side, or maybe just, the forward group in general, obviously the Maple Leafs made a lot of additions to their bottom six, try to revamp it, try to get more competitive, more energy, more intensity out of their bottom six with their off-season signings. There are still a lot of fans aren't on board with the signings this season. Obviously, they let Ilya Mikheyev walk. Andre Kasha also left. Obviously, there's going to be some players that need to fill the void and need to step up. Out of the off-season signings for the Maple Leafs depth forwards, who is one player that you are looking that can have a significant impact this season? Shane, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I wrote an article a few weeks ago once free agency kicked off, and my biggest focus was Kel Jarnkrok. And I was really happy. I was actually camping when they signed him, and a buddy of mine texted me, and I was ecstatic, and I couldn't believe that they landed him for 4 years. So I'm really happy to see, or excited, I should say, to see what he can do. It seems like he's going to start third line right wing. You'll have Camp in the middle, and then you'll have Pierre Engvall on the left wing. So I think those three can do some damage. But Jarnkrok's a guy that can step up and move up the lineup if there's an injury. Not a long-term solution, but he's a short-term solution kind of guy. He works hard. He's going to help the penalty kill. he was coveted at last season and the season before when it came to the trade deadline. So I think it's a really good situation for him. I think, a lot of people don't realize the Maple Leafs have a ton of Swedes on their team. So he's coming into a dressing room that's going to be an easy transition. He probably knows some of those guys from back home, from minor hockey, who knows, but there's going to be some connection there that just makes things easier for him. And anytime you're joining a new team, that's exactly what you like to hear.
Absolutely. Alex, who do you have your eye on that can make a significant impact out of all depth signings?
So I'm going to cheat a little bit here. When I say a depth signing, I'm not going to use somebody that the Leafs signed fresh this year. I'm going to use somebody who was on the team last year. I think a guy you could make a big impact this year is Pierre Engvall. And I say Engvall, I wrote an article on 3 players who could have a breakout season this year. And the reason I use Engvall is for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's in a contract year that's going to take him right to unrestricted free agent status. And we know how players produce in contract years. Mm-hmm. Second of all, we saw flashes of Pierre Engvall's offensive skill last year. I think it took him a while to really find his stride offensively in the NHL, but we saw him start to find himself in that role a little more this year. He had 15 goals, and there were times when, he took a shot from the slot that would go in and out of the net. Like it would go out of the net quicker than it went in. And, we're sitting here wondering where was this Pierre Engvall shot? Like why hasn't he used the shot more often? And on top of that, you've got that interview that he did over the summer where he said that he thinks he can score 20 goals. And so I put all those dots, I connect all those dots together. We just talked about how there's a potential vacancy on that second line left wing next to Tavares and Nylander. And, he might not fit the role that you said, Shane, in the sense that he's hard to play against, because he does need to be a little more physical, I think, for his size. But at the same time, I think he's a guy you could be a finisher on that top line. And like it or not, like that 6'5", 220-pound frame barreling at you is going to be intimidating, whether he throws the body or not. And he's got the speed to, I think, bring that lines, sort of elevate Tavares a little bit in that sense. And I think that he set himself up for a perfect situation this year. And I think if he jumps into that top 6 role and takes some regular reps, develop some chemistry with Nylander and Tavares, I think that there's potential for him to break out right there and make a significant impact.
Yeah, definitely not a bad choice with Pierre Engvall. And obviously, when we saw towards the end of the season, when he scored that snipe on Andrei Vasilevsky, you knew that he was starting to turn a corner and maybe the offensive production is starting to come around. Obviously, playoffs may be a different story, but regular season, he did have some success in that regard.
Yeah, I think he's got that predictable spinorama shot that he needs to get rid of, because he tends to rely on that a little too much. But a lot of people, he's an underrated skater. And like Alex said, he's a huge dude. So I think if he can just piece it all together, he's going to have a huge year. And if I'm giving a quick hot take on my first episode here, is they're going to re-sign him and they won't re-sign Alex Kerfoot.
I can see that happening. I really can't see that happening. And with his $3.5 million off the books, that at least frees some space up to sign Pierre Engvall to at least another 3-4 year deal, sort of to that Alexander Kerfoot contract, because he probably can be that all situational player. I want to chime in here, and I'm, as much as I want to say Nick Aube-Kubel, because the Leafs do need some tenacity and he has some fight in him, I'm going to say Adam Gaudette. I think he's going to be a really great reclamation project, and one that I think is going to have some success. After having a 33-point season in 59 games in 2019-20, obviously he's had some difficulty sustaining the lineup. It has dealt with injuries as well, I believe. But his all-around game, he can be great offensively and defensively, something that the Maple Leafs want in their depth. And he may be in the 4th line role, but I think he's going to be an underrated goal scorer, and I think may fill that void that Jason Spezza lost with his, roughly 20 points that you could probably get from a 4th liner. And the fact that he had 6 goals and 8 points in 10 games for Team USA at the World Hockey Championship that recently happened in May, I think that may have been a tipping point where maybe he was getting meaningful minutes, he was getting his opportunities, and he was being a scoring threat. And I think the Maple Leafs liked what they saw, and I think maybe they have something to work with him in their most likely going to start in a fourth line role. But I wouldn't be surprised if he can move up into a third or maybe obviously not second line role, but in that bottom six role, move up one more line. I think that they got something special with Gaudette, and I think they can try and help turn things around with him.
I think he can also make an impact on the power play as well. I think he's a guy that
Absolutely.
you can get away with throwing onto that second unit, maybe just parking him at the hash marks. And also, if you haven't seen, this guy is one of the best cellies in the league. Mm-hmm. He's known for his celebrations. So you go watch some highlights of him scoring goals, and it'll fire you up. It'll make you want to root for him this year.
I'm all for the Sellies. I mean, a lot of people aren't, but you know what? The Sellies are what gets the fans going, and it brings in the younger crowds. So you know what? I just can't wait to see what Gaudette can do heading into this season. Moving on to our final topic. Obviously, this is still a hot button issue surrounding the Maple Leafs and Kyle Dubas right now. Once again, Rasmus Sandin, a restricted free agent, still unsigned at this point. We still don't know what's going to happen. It doesn't look great at this point. And obviously, you're going to start seeing the trade pieces come out very soon. And I know, Alex, you're starting to work on one with a possible player that I have been on board with for at least the past 2 seasons right now. I just want you to give a quick thought on what you think about a possible deal for Rasmus Sandin.
Yeah, so I think that obviously the Toronto media is sort of on high alert when it comes to offer sheets and restricted free agent contract negotiations, the way that Nylander held out in 2018, the way that Marner sort of held out in 2019 up until the first game of the season. And then you see Carolina offer sheet Jesperi Kotkaniemi from Montreal. And then, you know, you put all those things together combined with the general overreaction of Leaf fans and media. And I think that everybody's on high alert over this Sandin contract negotiation. Now, I personally don't think that it's going to get to the point that the other negotiations the Leafs have had with RFAs did, because I just don't think that Sandin's made enough of a case to really, you know, hold out for that much money. I don't think
he doesn't have the leverage.
No, and I don't think he's really earned more than Timothy Liljegren has, for example. And for reference, Liljegren's on a 2-year deal, $1.4 million a year. So if it comes to the point where the Leafs have to make a trade, and I say if, because I think the Leafs should still do everything they can to keep him. I don't want them to overpay for him, but I do want them to keep him if they can. If there is a trade to be made, I think that there is a fit with the Vancouver Canucks. And our producer, Matthew Zator, directly above Peter, if you're watching us on YouTube, we'll see what he thinks of this take, resident Canucks contributor. But basically, the deal that I have in mind is Sandin going to Vancouver for a package centered around Conor Garland. There it is. There's Peter's boy. And I say that because we were just talking about how we need a guy, the Leafs need a guy in the top 6 to sort of provide a spark. And like you said, Shane, maybe be a little tougher to play against. And people are going to laugh at the thought of Garland being tough to play against because he's only 5'10". But this guy is a pest. And, you know, he's a pest in watching him play. He plays hard. He gets into the corners. And he's a guy that he'll make it hard to play against him. And I think that's something that the Leafs need in their top 6. Had 52 points last year. I think he had similar production to Alex Kerfoot, but he scored more goals. The year before, he had 39 points in 49 games, near a point per game player in 2021 for the Coyotes rather. And his contract is also in a perfect place right now. He's got 4 years left. I think he's making just below $5 million a year. And whether or not the Canucks are going to move him is a big question in itself, because obviously with the strength of the Pacific Division, or the weakness, I should say, of that division, the Canucks they've got enough pieces they could challenge for the playoffs this year. And if they do, Garland's going to be a big part of that. But if they do end up deciding to make a move, I think there's a clear fit there between the Leafs and the Canucks. Sandin, I mean, the Canucks, if I recall correctly, don't really have any prospect depth on the left side aside from Jack Rathbone. You've got Oliver Ekman-Larsson on the left side there. Obviously, you're going to be looking to get him out of there pretty soon. And with Quinn Hughes on the top pairing, I think Sandin down the road would be a perfect top 4 defenseman for them. He's not really where Garland, you can't really compare him and Garland because they play different positions, but I would say that Garland's got the edge in terms of experience and production to this date, but Rasmus Sandin is still so young and he's still got so much potential. And if it really gets to the point where there's no resolution to be had besides a trade, then I think that would be a good place to start. So if that happens, maybe Dubas looks to Vancouver for a fit there, but I'm not going to speculate. I mean, even though I just did speculate, I'd rather the Leafs keep Sandin if they can, but if they can't, then I think there's a fit there.
I've talked too much about Conor Garland and how much I love him as a winger. And I think maybe he would be beneficial and be that, kind of spark plug on that second line. Shane, I want to get your thoughts. Would this be a good deal for both sides? And would Conor Garland still provide that great that secondary scoring that the team needs?
A couple things here, guys. I would love him on the Leafs. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a great player. I think his style of play does fit. He's an aggressive player that can put up points, and I think they need more of those. But he's over $4 million, and the Leafs have 1.4 overage right now. And you're talking about trading a guy that's going to get a $1.4 million contract or so. So to me, the numbers just don't add up. So the only way you're going to make that deal as the Leafs is you're going to package Kerfoot with him to balance the books, and then now you have another hole. Or does he just slide into where Kerfoot would have, and then you're just banking on Engvall's production? So it would create a little bit of a hole as far as left wing depth if you had to add such like Kerfoot to it, and I think you would just based on the money, because I don't think there's other options to deal because you got Muzzin and Brody aren't going anywhere, and maybe it's Justin Hall, who knows? But I still don't know how the money will work. But he is a great player. Vancouver's in a tough situation with JT Miller's contract situation, so they don't know, who else is going to stay and who's going to go, but they definitely need some help on their blue line. So Sandin would help a lot of teams, but I had wrote a couple of players to focus on, and if Sandin was to get dealt, I was in the same boat as Alex. I don't want to see him go. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I think with the connection to Dubas, he's not going anywhere. Like, let's be honest, right? So if they do move him, I could see like a Ryan McLeod from Edmonton, just because he's in the same situation, a young restricted free agent. They could use some help on the blue line. Barrett Hayton was someone that's kind of a bit of a pipe dream where you'd have to throw in a little bit extra to get him out of Arizona, of course. But same thing, it's going to come down to money, and it currently is coming down to money because he's not signed, right? So I think his agent's trying to make sure that he's putting the player in a situation where one, he's compensated properly, but also given some playing time, because right now the Leafs have 6 defensemen that are going to dress. Liljegren had a great year. I mean, is Sandin an upgrade over Justin Hall? I personally think so, but it doesn't seem like the Leafs think that, just because he's right-handed and he's tough to play against. So for me, it's like one of Hall, Muzzin, or Sandin are going to go, and personally, I think it's Justin Hall, and I hope that's the case for Leafs Nation.
And I should have specified that too. If the Leafs have to move out a defenseman this year, they have, I think, 9 NHL capable defensemen on their team right now. I think if they're going to move anybody out, it would have to be Hall. I know that Keefe and Dubas love him, but at the same time, with Brody, Liljegren, and the absolute backlog of defensemen on the left side, I see it really hard to really make a case to keep Justin Hall this time around. I thought they were going to trade him last year. Obviously, they ended up protecting him and keeping him, but I think this year, above all, I'm interested to see how the money works out. And you raise a good point in that, bringing Conor Garland in, the Leafs are not going to be able to make that money work if it's just a 1-for-1 swap. So I think that, Kerfoot being included or somebody being included would have to make that work. And it would leave a little bit of a hole, but at the same time, I think they have a couple of internal players who could fill that hole, especially if it's in the bottom 6. We talked about Pontus Holmberg on the show before. I think he's a guy who, with a strong training camp, he could make a big impact.
It's one they can afford.
Yep, we're talking about guys like Joey Anderson, Nick Abruzzese, looking to make an impact and solidify a spot in the lineup. I think if you're bringing in a player like Garland, I think that Dubas and especially Brandon Pridham would find a way to make the money work. But those 2 players 1-for-1, you're right. It would be difficult to see that happening. But hopefully, in the end, we don't even have to have this conversation because, like I said, I'd like to keep Rasmus Sandin more than anything else. But if not, then I think Conor Garland is a good target for them at the start of the season. And if the Canucks are out of the playoff race around the trade deadline, who knows? Maybe he's a guy the Leafs look to acquire then.
Makes it a little easier at the deadline for sure.
And also with Rasmus Sandin, obviously you'd like to try and play him on the right side, but he just hasn't quite worked out. And also you do have Jordy Ben and Victor Mete, who can play both the left and right D. So it'll be interesting to see how this will play out, because they got 9 steady NHL defenders on their roster right now. And again, as we inch closer to training camp and Rasmus Sandin is still without a contract, doesn't quite look good for him or for the Maple Leafs, because again, he's got so much potential and talent. And I agree with both of you, both for reasons to keep Sandin, trade him, or not trade and bring in Garland. There are so many variables, and it's just going to be very interesting to see how this will play out as we inch closer to the start of the season. And again, hoping that Rasmus Sandin does sign a contract, frees him up, because again, we've seen what he can do. It's just absolutely phenomenal to watch him play. And especially on the power play, how he's able to rush the puck up very quickly. I think the Maple Leafs could definitely use that.
What I could see too, Peter, is maybe not necessarily a mirror contract to Liljegren's. And I could see them buying some of his unrestricted free agent years, because that's how much they like the player. So maybe that's maybe it's those 3rd and 4th and 5th years where, you're getting into those $4 to $5 million. Who knows? But maybe they lock him in at 5, at 2.5 to 3.5, and come up with a little bit more of a creative contract, because as we all know, the books aren't perfect in Toronto, so creativity is what is basically kept Dubas's job.
Absolutely, and good thing that Brandon Pridham is still on board with the contract or salary cap maneuvering. And also, one more point, if they do try to bring in Conor Garland, I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in a third team to try and eat maybe a slight portion of that salary, maybe $750K. Possibly. It has happened before with the Maple Leafs, as we saw with the Nick Foligno deal. And that's it for this week's show. Once again, this is brought to you by morningskate.io, the daily newsletter delivered to your inbox Monday to Friday, jam-packed with the best hockey stuff on the planet, with news, rumors, funnies, histories, quizzes, everything from around the NHL, brought to you by the incredible writing staff over that we have at the Hockey Writers. Once again, you'll see a link in the description below. Type in your email and you are all set to go. And once again, that's it for this episode. Thank you for tuning in to the Maple Leafs Lounge, and big congrats on Shane Seney for his first episode with us. Again, Shane, great to have you on board, and can't wait to have you on more episodes for the Maple Leafs Lounge in the future.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, guys. It's been great fun. I was definitely really nervous at first, but once you get that first shift, you get the blood flowing, it's just another game, right? So off we go.
Exactly. It's just a couple of dudes talking hockey in the end. Nothing to
love
be worried
that.
about.
Love that. Typical hockey answer post game kind of thing. So glad we got that little soundbite from you, Shane. And once again, great to have you on board.
Thank you.
And once again, for Alex Hobson and Shane Seney, I'm Peter Baracchini, and we'll see you next time on the Maple Leafs Lounge.